One man. Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. Oh, no, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Three Technique, the college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes. Garrett Turney, Mitch Mason with you here for the Week 11 preview. And Garrett, Trey's off doing big-time professional things, whining and dining the executives on a work trip. So when Dad's away, the kids will play, as they say.
Dude, I'm pumped. I love these types of things. Obviously, Trey's getting to have all the fun doing the fancy stuff, but, you know, as long as we're just sitting here not at Rice Eccles Stadium and all that goodness, then I guess we'll just have to find a way to make do and kick back. And it's a fun slate. I think we're going to have a good time with it.
Yeah, we had some folks ask, like, man, are you guys traveling to big time matchups now with the show? And like, well, no, we're not that big time yet. Would love to be working towards that. We have new folks subscribing every single day, but not that big time quite yet. Trey out on a work trip, but
we'll just call it opportunistic, right?
That's right. Exactly. We we just like to look around and see what's in our environment. It happened to be a top 25 matchup, so Trey was out there covering it. We've got the Week 11 preview on deck, and Garrett, we've got some fun games. We've got, I think, a pretty compelling Big Three to get through. We've got a fun slept-on game of the week. We've talked about the ACC chaos on these last couple episodes. We've got midweek action. We've got a trifecta of games on Friday night that have some big-time implications. It may not be a condensed slate on Saturday that kind of gets the blood boiling, but I really think every single week, we start to focus in on the playoffs. You've got big time storylines in all the major conferences. This month of November, man, like I just get kind of giddy when I look at the schedule and when I look at the games that we've got on deck, because this is what we play for, man. I mean, everything's right in front of us.
Yeah, and obviously midweek action is always primo. We love the midweek action. That is something that I live for. As soon as that calendar flips over to November, we know that it's time, and I start getting a little excited. But this is one of those advantages that I saw coming with the expansion of the playoff was that, yeah, there's going to be more games that matter. Like the games that we're previewing tonight in our Big Three all have serious implications for the playoff for both sides. Both sides could make it a little bit better, play for better seeding, play for the, positioning in their conference races. There's real consequences to what happens. If it was just a 14 playoff, like we're talking about one of these teams tonight really being in contention, that maybe two, but it's a lot better now that we're able to sit in a position where we say, hey, we got more teams that are actually fighting for it. This game matters a lot more. The stakes are higher. The environments are going to be bigger. It just makes the game a little bit more fun.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it waters down the product at all. And hey, you get more fan bases talking about it on Twitter, debating each other across the lunch table, the break room, what have you. I think it's good for the sport. Shout out to the midweek action, by the way, which will be, played and finished by the time this comes out on Wednesday morning. So UMass at Akron. Gotta love that. Akron, 9.5-point favorites. Miami of Ohio at Ohio. That's a big time game in the MAC that, Garrett, you've been high on the Red Hawks all season long. Mm-hmm. I was high on the Bobcats coming in, even without Tim Albin still there leading the shop. So that would be a huge consequential game, obviously on a Tuesday night. And then the Wednesday slate, Kent State at Ball State, Northern Illinois at Toledo. I mean, listen, all football is good football. We're excited to have it back on our TV. But with that being said, let's get to our Big Three. And of course, this episode, all of our episodes brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Use our code 3TechPod for and play a $5 lineup, get $100 in bonus funds. MLB obviously just wrapped up, but you've got NBA going on. You've got college basketball that just tipped off, the NFL, and obviously college football continues to roll on. Just pick your favorite players, pick higher or lower on their stats, and you can win up to 1,000 times your money, which sounds like a pretty good deal to me. So 3TechPod is our code. You can get the sign-up bonus if you use that for first-time customers. Garrett, let's start with our game of the week, and it is the Big 12 game of the year by our estimation. Number 8 BYU at number 9 Texas Tech in Lubbock. This is battle for sole possession of first place in the Big 12. It's an 11 a.m. game on ABC. This sucks for so many reasons. It should be a night game where the folks in Lubbock get a little extra crazy. I saw a bunch of comparisons made between this game and the game in 2008 when Texas Tech upset the University of Texas. And I mean, I guess with the stakes on the line, you can make that direct comparison, but having one of them start before the sun has reached its apex and the other one, in the cold winter night of the desert, I think the comparison kind of ends there. I feel like this is going to be a great game. The Red Raider fans are going to show up. They're going to tailgate early, get ready for this game. But man, I wish this was kicking off at nighttime.
It really does deserve the nightcap on this one. And to go back to that on the comparison between that game against Texas, the other massive thing that's missing from it is a big time elite catch against your in-state rival. And then maybe an even bigger time elite iconic rushing the field with 1 second left that turned into, no, everyone get back to the walls. We can't climb back over them, but just get back to the walls. And then watching the Fumblerooski turn into an actually elite field storm. And so, yeah, maybe the events of the game will actually lead to something like that. I kind of tend to doubt it, but maybe the events of the game lead to something that dramatic. Just going to be a little bit lesser of a scene just because of the time, right? If this was happening at night, the fireworks going off, the lights and everything else, it'd be a lot more fun.
Yeah, well, the Red Raiders 10.5-point favorites as of time of recording. Those lines obviously subject to change. But Texas Tech, a heavy favorite in this game. Baron Morton came back from injury last week against Texas Tech. The Red Raider defense was last seen forcing 5 turnovers and what was really a pretty sloppy game against Kansas State. They kind of bludgeoned them into submission in the fourth quarter. But, I think some openings, perhaps, with all the injuries that the Red Raiders have suffered. On the other side, though, BYU is also potentially dealing with some injuries here. Middle linebacker LJ Martin are, I think, going to be questionable for this game. It sounds like they're both making progress and probably headed towards playing. But, you ideally would like a clean bill of health as both of these teams line up. 10.5 points, though, feels like a large number. Texas Tech at home, obviously. Which way are you leaning?
My decision on this entirely hinges on if LJ Martin plays. And I feel bad doing that because it feels like I get to do my wishy-washy thing, but I'm going to stick with it. I'm just going to keep playing it. He was not ruled out. They got the injury update. He is practicing this week, and they're hoping to kind of evaluate later in the week and see if he can go. Mm-hmm. That, to me, feels like, at worst, it's probably a snap count situation where he might get 10 carries or something like that. Because if he can practice, he can find a way into a game, in my opinion, especially a game with this many stakes. My big key here is the fact that Tech really doesn't allow anything on the ground. The biggest total against them on the ground is 126, happened last week. They're averaging 2.4 rushing yards per game, or rushing yards per carry allowed, not per game. That's insane. Per carry allowed. And if they don't have LJ Martin back there, I just don't see a way that BYU keeps it close. I don't think that, in that situation that Bachmeier will be good enough both on the ground and in the air to keep the offense balanced just by himself. But the flip of that is if LJ Martin plays in this game, I could see this being a real coin toss. So I would pick BYU plus the 10.5 if he plays. This is one of those where I do think that they are good enough with those two guys, LJ Martin and Bachmeier together, to run a little bit of that, he gets a carry, I get a carry, kind of trade off a little bit, make them wonder where it's coming from. And I think that's where they would be able to succeed in this one, is to kind of keep Tech off balanced. If you're just teeing up the quarterback for what that defensive line is and for what that team is on the other side of the field, I think it's a good day for the Red Raiders. So, for me, it's tough to kind of want to go back and forth on this one. And it's tough to say that with these two great teams that it could just hinge on one player. But for me, I really think it hinges on that because that's how good I think LJ Martin really is. So look, I'm gonna sit on the fence on this one. I'm gonna say BYU plus 10.5 if he plays. Otherwise, it's gonna be the Red Raiders rolling.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot for BYU. I think they need to be balanced offensively in order to have a chance in here. I'm going to take BYU plus 10.5. And here's why I think they can keep it interesting. You mentioned that Texas Tech allowed 126 to Kansas State last week. That was the high water mark for rushing yards allowed by the Red Raiders. 88 of those yards, though, came from Avery Johnson on quarterback scrambles. So I went and looked up what Bear Bachmeier has done on the ground. He's just run for a cool 409 on the ground with 9 touchdowns. So BYU being able to run the ball between the tackles with LJ Martin is critical. But what I saw from Texas Tech last week was they had a hard time spying a mobile quarterback. And obviously, Kansas State didn't have the firepower to quite keep up with Tech. And hey, turning the ball over 5 times is really going to hurt you as well. But if BYU can keep control of the ball, which they've done a great job of this season, I wonder if the mobility of Bear Bachmeier is enough to keep them in this ballgame. It's the 15th best rushing offense for the Cougars against the number 1 rushing defense for Texas Tech. So that's the main storyline that I'm watching for. The other thing I wonder is if BYU can move the chains on third down. Texas Tech is 18th in third down stop rate. So you go, man, a lot of those numbers sound like Red Raider numbers. Why on earth are you taking BYU plus the points? Simply put, I'm not betting against the Cardiac Cougars. We have seen them in this position, not just this season, but Garrett, even going back to last year, right? When they really burst onto the scene against SMU, the physicality, the toughness that they play with, which we mention just about every single week, I think is enough to keep them in this game. I think they can get pressure on Baron Morton. I think they can do enough to slow down Texas Tech's offense as well. Keep this within 2 scores. I do like the Red Raiders to win, but I'm not willing to give BYU, even on the road, that many points.
Well, and they will fight, right? They're not going to flinch. They're not going to come out here and just lay an egg. I don't see that as a possibility, right? I just don't think that's the case. And even, to BYU's credit, I just told them, that, hey, if LJ Martin is out, I don't think they have a real chance at keeping it close. But to their credit, they did lose him beginning of their previous game, went down in that game, and then came storming back. So, maybe, with the bye week and being able to kind of rest a little bit, kind of figure out what does the game plan look like without LJ Martin. Maybe they got some stuff keyed up. It's going to be a lot more on, if that's the case, what I would love to see BYU do is spread it out a little bit, right? Get a little bit of the spacing issues for Bear out of there, and then just let him pick apart a little bit, go for the quick passes, and if not, run. Just, take off running. And if, Tech really has an issue with the spy and really has an issue with a running quarterback in that case, that's where I think they could have some success. So I don't know what the game plan is. That'll be kind of really interesting to see. If Martin can't go, what do they come out trying to do in that first quarter? What did they draw up on the bye week to say, hey, here's going to be our, key to victory, how we think our offense works the best without our best player, one of the best players in the Big 12. It's going to be really interesting to see. It's really tough to want to pick against them, right? Because you're totally right. They just fight, right? They just kind of stick with you. But I want to give Tech their credit as well. They haven't always played their best football. They haven't always looked like, they're one of the top teams in the country. And yet they keep just kind of winning by massive margins, right? Outside of their one loss, which, that it happens, they've been winning by some pretty massive margins all year long. I want to give them a little bit of kudos on that and say, hey, BYU is a heck of a team and they can give it to you and control the game a little bit. But, if this kind of spirals a little bit, if they can't get anything going on the offensive side for the Cougars, I do think Tech finds their way to pull away.
Yeah, and listen, Kansas State was right there in that game in the fourth quarter against the Red Raiders. The turnovers, just the inability to hold on to the ball, ultimately sunk the Wildcat ship. BYU doesn't turn it over, though. They're third in the country in turnover margin. They're plus 10 on the season. So Texas Tech's defense, they're going to have to win straight up to not only win this game, but obviously to cover. Trey would be on the Red Raiders to win, but BYU to cover as well. So that's the trifecta, taking the 10.5 in Lubbock this weekend. We'd love to know what your pick is. Write in at 3Tech Pod to let us know if you're taking the Red Raiders or if you're on BYU. Yeah, let's move over to the SEC, and the SEC game of the week is number 3 Texas A&M on the road against number 19 Missouri. This is the 2:30 p.m. game on ABC directly after Texas Tech and BYU. The last time that the Aggies started 9-0, Garrett, 1992, and that was a year that they actually went undefeated and made it to the Cotton Bowl before suffering their first loss. So some nice history, I think, on the side of the Aggies. They've had some recent success over Missouri as well. And then probably the biggest storyline coming in is that the Tigers are on their third string true freshman quarterback in Matt Zollers after Bo Prabula went down with likely a season-ending ankle injury against Vanderbilt. So obviously, when you look at this game, the initial metrics not going to be kind in favor of Missouri, and I think that's why A&M is a 7.5-point favorite on the road. I immediately went to look at the offensive line numbers for Missouri. How are they protecting their quarterback over the course of this year? Because boy, howdy, Texas A&M can get after the passer. Cash Howell is a demon who's been unleashed off the edge this year, and it's not great. Missouri is 89th in protecting the quarterback this season. So I think if A&M can have some early success in run defense, the edge is going to pin their ears back and get after a young quarterback. I know Mike Elko is probably going to scheme up some funky looks pre-snap, some coverage disguises to hopefully confuse this young quarterback, a talented Matt Zollers. But on the other hand, Missouri clearly has to win this on the ground. And I say that A&M can pin their ears back and get after the passer if they're able to stop the run. They're a top 30 rush defense, but they've been prone to some big plays on the ground. And that's obviously what Ahmad Hardy has made his name on this year with Missouri. So you've got a young quarterback. You've got a seasoned running game that is tapered off a little bit in SEC play. It's a big number on the road and a historic spot potentially for Texas A&M. Are you on the Aggies or the Tigers here from Como?
I think A&M wins big and continues to just make statements that they are one of the best, if not the best team in the country. Look, here's kind of the way that I think this breaks down. I don't envy the fact that you've got a third string quarterback going out there if you're Missouri, right? There's probably going to be a lot of conversation if Missouri loses this game of, oh man, but if we just had Prabula, could you imagine what we could have done? That there's going to be some of that conversation, and rightly so, right? Anytime you got a third string quarterback going in there, that's probably what's happening. And he probably won't be running very much, even if that's part of his game, because you don't want to be down to your fourth string quarterback, right? Even if
Right.
that's where you are, you're probably not going to run your quarterback very much. And he's making his first start against the number one defense in sacks per game. Texas A&M has 4.00 sacks per game. That is the number one mark in the country. Even if you can convince me somehow that, Cassius Howell's getting contained and they're going to find a way to slide a tight end over there to keep him slowed down, and, some combination of that plus the SEC refs never calling holding, that might contain Cassius Howell. But on the other side, you got Deion Hayes. Up the middle, you got guys like DJ Hicks and Tyler and Yedem who are really making names for themselves, getting up and being, crazy on that defensive line. And even if those guys can't win, you still got guys like Scooby that could come in on a blitz. There's a lot of players on this A&M team that are going to get after the quarterback. And if you have to sit in the pocket, especially if you're trailing at any point in that game and they kind of take the run script out of it for you, I don't like the way this goes for Missouri. You combine this with the fact that A&M has only scored under 30 points one time this season. That was a game with a whole lot of penalties and weird miscues and stuff like that. They've scored 40 plus in 5 of their 8 games this year, 45 plus in back-to-back road games against Arkansas and LSU. If I want to lowball A&M, I feel like I'm spotting them 30 points, right? I feel like 30 points is an easy get for any, week out for the Aggies. Do I believe that a young quarterback is going to stay composed against that and be able to kind of keep them in this against a good defense? I kind of doubt that. And so really for me, it's just, can the offense deliver? That's going to come up to, Marcel Reed making good decisions, avoiding the pass rush, because Missouri does have a pretty good pass rush of their own.
Yeah.
Big issue for Missouri, though, here is the Texas A&M offensive line hadn't given up a sack in 4 games. They're playing extremely well. Marcel Reed is understanding the pressure very well, getting away from the pressure, getting the ball out quick. I just think that continues. I think a week of rest, a week of just kind of being able to refocus, I think is going to be really good for the Aggies. And I think that they're going to kind of cruise in this one. It could be close at the half, but I kind of think this is one of those, kind of classic pull away in the second half. Even if they're up by, 7 or 10 or something like that at the half, I do think they pull away and end up winning this one, something like 20 or 30 points.
Yeah, I go back and forth on this because I also think that Texas A&M, even if they're less efficient offensively, I don't know that Missouri is going to be able to score all that easily on Texas A&M. Now, Missouri is one of the best teams in the country at gaining 20 plus yards on explosive runs in the country. A&M is 99th in the country at giving those plays up, like I mentioned off the top. So that's the big concern that I have. We haven't seen Missouri wide receivers take over a ball game yet. I'm really loath to think that this is their breakout game against an A&M secondary that really has taken a lot of control as the season has gone along. You mentioned the case for the defensive line for the linebackers as well. I am curious to see what this A&M offense does against the best scoring defense that they'll have played so far. Missouri's 13th in the country at preventing scoring. The next best defense that they played was Auburn at home. They only scored 16 points in that, but you go just a few spots down the list, you get to LSU, who's 22nd on that list, and obviously they blew them out of their own building the last time we saw them on the field. So I could see kind of one or the other of those scenarios playing out. I think it's probably somewhere in the middle. Now, that being said, on the off chance that this turns into a old-fashioned, grinded out slugfest in the trenches, like we kind of expected last year's game would, and then A&M blew the roof off Missouri. But on the off chance that that happens, I'm going to ride with the defense that I have been supporting since the preseason. I mean, since well into the really the spring and the summer. I love what Missouri's defense has. I think this is going to be the biggest challenge that Colin Klein and the Aggies offense has faced to this point. I think Texas A&M gets the win, but I think because both teams want to run the ball, to be physical at the point of attack, I think this maybe is a little bit lower scoring of a game, maybe a shorter game. And I just respect the heck out of both of these defenses. So I'll take Missouri to cover the 7.5. Give me Texas A&M winning something like 24-17, something like that, just barely covering that number. But I do think that the Aggies march on in their undefeated streak. Again, would invite your comments, your opinions as well. Texas A&M, do they cover the 7 in the hook, or does Missouri keep it close, maybe even win outright at home? If you've got them playing spoilers, let us know at 3Tech Pod. Our final big three is number 6, Oregon at Iowa. The Ducks are favored by 6.5 inside Kinnick. You've got Puddles, you've got Herky, you've got the Kinnick Wave. It's a bunch of Big Ten storylines in this one. Let's start here, though, because you have been our resident Oregon supporter. I'd like a temperature check on Oregon from you. Currently, they don't really have a quality win on their record. Obviously, when they played Penn State, it was a big win, but that win has aged very poorly. And the last time that we saw them, they only beat Wisconsin, who's absolutely hapless, 21-7 on their own field before going into a bye. So maybe not the most confidence that Oregon could be bringing into this game in a tough road environment. Where's your confidence in the Ducks?
I still think that Oregon's a very good football team, and I do think that, end of the day, I think they'll probably win this game. If you peek down the sheet a little bit, I do actually have Iowa covering this 6.5, and it's not because I'm a massive Iowa believer. In fact, if you were to look at this game and assume that I'm picking it without actually reading any of my notes, you probably think I got Oregon huge because I've been notorious Iowa disrespecter this year with the lack of ability to throw the football, and I've been pretty big on the Ducks. But man, like Oregon just has not been giving me reasons to believe in them recently. You look at the Northwestern game earlier in the season, and I thought they played better than what the final score kind of looked like, but they didn't really pull away in that one until late.
Mm-hmm.
They let Penn State get back into the game that they ultimately won, but we now see that maybe that Penn State team wasn't very good. They got beat by Indiana, where they struggled heavily, and then they did struggle with Wisconsin. They just don't really seem to have that killer instinct, right? Like that's something that I feel like we've seen out of Oregon the last several years is, with Dan Lanning coming in, we've seen, some of the clips from the locker room speeches. And obviously, Colorado last year kind of was the big moment where they come out there and they just punch them in the teeth and knock out a couple of them and send them crying back home. That was an insane performance to just step on their throats. But I just don't see that out of this Oregon team. I don't see them doing that. On the flip side of that, Iowa only has 2 losses by a combined 8 points. Both losses to very good teams. And they seem to find ways to just kind of like muddy it up, not get beat by the team that's more talented that badly, right? Even with the Penn State game, I think you could probably argue Penn State was more talented than Iowa, but they found a way to kind of muddy up the game and find their way through with a win. I think this one plus the home field advantage, Hawkeye fans show up for it. They're going to keep it close. I think Oregon probably wins this one with the last second field goal, right? Probably a tie game, need a drive, come up with one or two big plays down the stretch, a couple big completions, because I still do believe in this Oregon team. I think they're a really good team. Just don't think they have that killer instinct. So even if I could even see it being a situation where they're up 10 and then they let Iowa kind of scoot back into this game a little bit and make it too close for comfort. I just don't see the path for Oregon winning this game huge.
Well, and see, that's the thing. Like, I agree wholeheartedly, but I don't need him to win huge, right? I just need him to win by 7 points, and that's
Fair.
where I sat on this game for a long time, because listeners of this show will remember in our Big Ten preview series, I said that I was winning this game all the way back in the summer. I called my shot. I said off a bye, I like the Hawks to beat the Ducks in Kinnick Stadium, and so I'm not like totally backing off of that. I still am kind of rooting for that outcome, because I think Iowa is just patently a fun football team with their Big Ten style of play. But my football brain cannot understand or convince myself to take Iowa plus the 6.5, because I frankly don't know how they're going to score against this Oregon defense. Oregon's a top 30 defense in preventing the run. Their linebackers are incredibly athletic. And you know that Mark Gronowski is not going to beat you with his arm, right? He's one of the most prolific rushers of the football from the quarterback position. I think Oregon's got the horses to be able to stop that, right? And in the past, when we've seen Iowa take on Ohio States, the Penn States, sometimes these are the games that they just kind of fall apart, right? The offense gets off to a sluggish start. Suddenly they're down 14-0, and you kind of know that's wraps. Now, they did beat Penn State at home. It's probably not a very good Penn State team based on the product that we're seeing on the field. But to your point, the talent was there. So maybe has Iowa turned a corner? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to expect from this Iowa team in a big spot. The last time I picked against the Hawks was in the game against Minnesota, the Floyd of Rosedale. Obviously, that went tremendously poor for my financial interests when they just blew out the Gophers. I think it was 41-3 was the final score there.
41-3 or 7. Yeah, there was something crazy.
Yeah, it wasn't even close. And I started that pick by asking, how on earth is Oregon covering the spread? So I feel like I'm kind of getting myself ready for part 2 here, but I guess if you made me make a pick for the sake of this segment, I'll take Oregon minus the 6.5, just because my football brain cannot wrap its head around Oregon not winning this game by 7, right? That's all. I've just got to win by a touchdown. I think if Oregon is legit, if Oregon is for real, they should be able to do that.
Yeah.
If not, congrats Hawks.
Well, and Oregon is a good enough team to be able to do that. They're a good enough team that they should be able to. Right now, I just kind of am wondering where that fire has gone. And I think it'll be hard to grab that on the road, right? I think that's where, if you're an Iowa fan, you can kind of hang your hat on, okay, they're going to have to run a little bit, right? We can maybe get real physical with them, keep them in some longer down and distances, force, more to make some throws. And if he does, great, good for Oregon. And I think, as Iowa fans, you probably expect that could be the case. But also, again, flip side is just, hey, what if they just keep keeping them off the field and they don't really let the field position get weird and, maybe set themselves up with a couple of shorter fields. Like, that could be good for them. Now, it's counterintuitive because, again, like, this is not what I've been arguing for. I've been arguing for Iowa can't do offense. They just can't. And then somehow, I'm going to bet against Oregon with a really good defense who plays physical. It seems counterintuitive to where I normally logic, but it just feels like a thing where, and maybe this is where we both are. Oregon was kind of my little pet team in the Big Ten. Iowa seems like they were kind of your team. And they both kind of been a little disappointing. So I think both of us are kind of backing off it a little bit and being like, yeah, I don't know if I really want to back you right now because you let me down a couple of times.
Yeah, man, the Iowa offense just has not been what I was promised and certainly peddled myself. I was part of the propaganda machine. I've apologized for that. So I don't know. I will watch with interest. I will not, in my locks of the week that I do over on Twitter, I certainly will not be touching this game. Like I said, I'm even hesitant to make an official pick for this, but that's the job. So Right
Now,
in.
question
Oh
though,
yeah.
are you just doing the meta thing where you don't believe in Iowa because you think when you don't believe in them, then they turn it around and surprise you? Like, is this
Well,
one of those you totally redeem yourselves moments?
listen, that if the emotional hedge pays off, then awesome. I win either way. I'll put it that way. Certainly rooting for Iowa to win this game. I think that would be a really fun story and would just throw another tremendous wrinkle into this playoff picture. But
Yeah, why
anyway,
not, right?
exactly. So those are our big three. Again, we'd love to know your opinion at 3techpod. You can write in, you can email us as well, 3techpod@gmail.com. Garrett, with that, let's move to our slept on game of the week. And that takes us out to ACC country. We've got Wake Forest at number 12, Virginia. The Cavs, 6.5-point favorites here. This one is going to be interesting, and I wish that Trey was here to take the reins of this preview because he has been our Wake Forest believer since the summer, saying that Wake was going to find a way to make it to a bowl game in their first year under Jake Dickert. They've done that with basically a lot of defense and just enough offense. Damon Claiborne has been very good. They've had an interesting quarterback system between Robbie Ashford, the Auburn transfer, and then Deshaun Purdy, who I believe came over from Charlotte, if I'm not mistaken. So it's just been kind of weird offensively. They beat SMU 13-12 at home a couple of weeks ago. That line feels suspiciously low, though, and I think Virginia is maybe cruising for their first loss. Can Wake Forest pull this off and stun another ACC contender?
I think Wake Forest can pull it off because we've proven at this point that the ACC is on some kind of drugs because it's just going crazy at this point, right? It is just madness out there. And look, there's really just two more teams between Virginia and Louisville. Those are the only two teams left that need their dumb loss, right? Like if you think about it, Georgia Tech has their dumb loss from last week. Miami's got a couple of dumb losses. Duke's got a dumb loss. Pitt's got a dumb loss. So if you think about like where the ACC is, there's really only a couple teams left to fall in this one. And look, the big thing for me is Virginia doesn't really put anyone away, right? They've been playing a lot of close games. They do win, but they don't really win by that much, and it doesn't really seem like they're that convincing. And man, like it's been real close a couple of times, right? Like I think about that, goal line stretch in overtime that could have been, right? That just came up just a couple of inches short. And then there's probably that was your season if you're Virginia there. So look, I think, look, is Wake Forest a better team? No, they're not. Wake Forest is not a better team than Virginia. Virginia should win this game. But again, it's the ACC. Dumb losses happen. If you let them hang around, if you let them stick in that game, I kind of like the mojo on the Wake Forest side to maybe pull the upset.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm giving Virginia a full 7 points. Basically, I think they probably do win this, but boy, they've been in so many sloppy, close games late. Wake Forest defense has been a brick wall at times, and listen, Chandler Morris has been banged up all season long. The offensive line has struggled to protect him and keep him upright at times. I think the ground game of Wake, very similarly to the Texas A&M Missouri game, maybe shortens this, maybe turns it into a knife fight in a phone booth. So I think I'll take Wake Forest plus the points. I I don't know, like the path to victory for both teams is probably forcing a couple of turnovers defensively and then just like running the heck out of the ball. Virginia can obviously air it out and they would love to see, a big performance to the air. I just don't know that you're going to get that against the Demon Deacons. This feels like an ugly 19-17 kind of game by the time we get
Mhm.
to 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter, right?
And I think even more than that, this game feels like it's going to be that ACC game of the week where we get the weird bounce of the ball, right?
Yeah.
Where it seems like every time we talk about one of these big time matchups in the ACC, the ball bounce is weird, or we think like last year with the whole like Virginia Tech Miami deal, and like was it a catch at the back of the end zone? And even this year, trying to pull the upset, for Virginia, and you got the whole Florida State situation, and then the catch that isn't a catch because you can't quite haul it. I mean, there's so many of those games where the ball just bounces freaky, and it's
Yeah.
just a weird situation. So yeah, I totally think that there will be at least one or two plays we're talking about from this game where we say, oh man, and that interception or that weird fumble recovery or something like that, where just it just didn't work out for the team on the negative side of it, right? You truly got to hope that the funny shaped ball bounces your way if you're Virginia.
It's very fair. And man, to think that a bad bounce could determine a playoff race, that gets me. That's the good stuff right there. That's
That's why
that's a
we love
temperature I'd
the
like to turn
expanded
up.
playoff, right? You get more of these games. They matter.
Exactly. So that's our slept on game of the week. Wake Forest at Virginia. Garrett, let's move down and talk a little bit of the G5 playoff picture, right? Because I think this is one of the most interesting storylines that's developed. This time last year, it was pretty clearly going to be Boise State. They had Ashton Genty, who's just running over everybody left, right, and center. This year, it is wide open, right? And let's start in the American. You've got 6 teams with just one conference loss. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody's in the running necessarily to make the playoffs at this point. A couple of them have 2 and 3 losses, like Tulane, Memphis, USF have both suffered multiple losses, but they still technically control their destiny, right? Tulane is at number 22, Memphis this week on a Friday night. I mentioned that trifecta of Friday night games. Tulane at Memphis is, to me, the one that you absolutely cannot miss. Memphis is 6.5-point favorites. South Florida, on the other hand, is home against UTSA this weekend. They've also got Navy. Navy is at Notre Dame, and then North Texas is idle this week after their big win over Navy. So there's kind of this like conglomerate of American teams that are all jonesing and hoping to make it not only to Charlotte for the ACC, or where do they play their ACC championship game?
I thought they played those on whoever's campus was the higher seed.
You're right. I think
I
the
thought that was what
American,
that one was.
yeah. The American, maybe the home team hosts that.
Yeah.
Elsewhere, you've got San Diego State, who is suddenly at the forefront of the Mountain West after Boise has now suffered 2 losses, one of them in conference to Fresno State. They're at Hawaii. They will host Boise State. They'll host San Jose State, and then they go to New Mexico. So that is by no means a clear path to the Mountain West Championship. That's a really difficult schedule. It's a San Jose State team that can be plucky at times, even though their record has not been very good this year. New Mexico is bowl eligible under head coach Jason Eck. They just pulled off a big win over UNLV. And then you've got James Madison in the Sun Belt. They're 7-1. Their one loss is to Louisville. They're at Marshall. They host App State and Washington State. And then they're at Coastal to finish this off. I look at this landscape and I still think that the odds are that an American team comes out and claims that playoff spot. But don't sleep on the Dukes now. I think James Madison has as big of a claim to that throne as anybody else in the country.
Yeah, and especially because the loss is only like at Louisville, right? That's a good loss, especially depending on how Louisville ends the season. Heck, if Louisville goes out there and wins the ACC, then that's looking like a really good loss if you can go finish that schedule 11-1 and win your conference. So that obviously could be big for them. But I think I'm with you. I think it's probably whoever wins the American. There's just too many really good teams, and I think as a whole, we respect a lot of what the top of that conference is. Especially if you're a team like taking Navy, right? You have a chance, at Notre Dame to make a huge statement. Not saying that I would pick them to win that game by any means. Notre Dame's looked pretty dang good. But if you go and you pull it off, I mean, that's a big statement, right? That's a huge statement that you could go and pad your resume with and say, hey, we actually beat a good team. We didn't just lose to a good team. Obviously there's going to be opportunities there. So, yeah, I think you're probably right. It's probably going to be, for me, it's probably coming down to someone like a Memphis or a UNT in for that spot. Either way, super fun matchups, whoever ends up with that and kind of sneaks in for, who's going to play the 5 seed, whoever that ends up being. So, very exciting end of the season coming up for the American. And the fun part is, again, kind of, mentioning on that expanded playoffs thing, this is why it's extra fun, is because now we get to talk about these teams and their chances at a playoff.
I love it. I've never been more invested in G5 football than I am right now. And listen, there's a lot of good football being played in the American right now. James Madison's doing it in the Sun Belt. The Mountain West has been spicy this year. So, listen, you may not have a national contender out of the MAC, but all football is good football. Again, we'll continue to preach that. So that's your G5 playoff update, just to keep you abreast of that here in week 11. Garrett, let's move to a little buy and sell. And this has been a popular segment since we introduced it, I guess, a couple of weeks ago now. So we've got the SEC and the Big Ten that we're covering here in this segment once again. And let's start with the SEC. I want you to buy or sell at least one middling team playing spoiler in their first game with an interim coach. You've got LSU at Alabama. the Tide are 10.5-point favorites. You've got Auburn at Vanderbilt, whose playoff life is on life support right now. The Doors are 7.5-point favorites at home against War Eagle.
I'm gonna sell the take, but man, it's spicy because you could make a case that LSU could turn it around now with the Grim Reaper out of the building, right? It always seems like vibes can shift in a place when you got that level of talent, and they've been bringing in guys to talk to the team about what it means to be an LSU Tiger and what it means to play for this team, and yeah, that's good, right? That's good to kind of get the culture back, and it seems like with Brian Kelly out, finally they can maybe go back to trying to restore some of that culture. I think they could play loose. They could play a lot better. I don't see it happening in Tuscaloosa, so I'm gonna say no anyways. The Auburn and Vanderbilt, the Auburn's just not a good football team. I don't think anything outside of, hey, did you see that we actually had this other playbook in the cupboard and we're just gonna pull this one out and all of a sudden we're a good football team? I don't see it happening. Maybe the Monstars stole Auburn's football players or something, but I just don't see anything outside of something wacky like that for Auburn pulling it off against Vanderbilt. But you got to look at that LSU game. That's going to be one I'm going to have my eye on. Again, struggles with watching multiple games now. That I'm on Fubo, but it's a possibility that I might be flipping over to that LSU Alabama game if it's staying close later into that game.
So I'm going to sell this take as well, but I'm actually more curious about the other game. I think Alabama probably beats LSU. LSU's not healthy right now. They're so banged up.
Yeah.
Alabama's got everything in front of them. They're at home. I think the Tide probably boat race LSU. But here's why I'm on Auburn covering this spread. The best data point that we have is probably between Texas and Missouri. Vanderbilt's rushing offense was non-existent, right? That's how they want to win games. Now, Diego Pavia threw for like 365 yards. I think most of that happened in the fourth quarter when Texas was I think they got sloppy. They got a little lackadaisical. They were up by 21. They took their foot off the gas, right? But in that Missouri game, Vanderbilt couldn't do anything on the ground. It was like one or two big plays that kind of broke tackles, got an open space that ended up being the difference between a win and a loss in a 17-10 game. I think Auburn is free from the Hugh Freeze curse. I do wonder if that playbook is somehow more free. Now, the Vanderbilt defensive line, way better than this offensive line. The Auburn offensive line is literally one of the worst things I've ever watched in college football. So I wouldn't actually put any stake in this game. But defensively, I wonder if this is a game where it's a 14-10 type final score. I think the matchup offensively for Vanderbilt isn't a good one. I wonder if we get that dead cat bounce that we've seen time and time again this year. You fire a coach, you play well in the next game, right? You play loose. There's nothing kind of holding itself over your head. So let's see. I'm going to put Vanderbilt on upset alert. Again, they're playing for their playoff lives. That loss to Texas was a bad one when it comes to trying to make the college football playoff. So
yeah,
they certainly should be motivated. Listen, I think it's a bad matchup for Vanderbilt.
That's the big thing for Vanderbilt is they got to make sure that they come out motivated because you don't have any more wiggle room and your name isn't going to help you. As much as we hate to say that, right? Like I hate saying that, oh, Vanderbilt won't get a chance because it's Vanderbilt. Like we kind of have to acknowledge that that's true. If Vanderbilt's, kind of right on that edge, but you get, someone out of the ACC or like one of the Big 12 teams that's kind of right there for an opportunity at the playoff, they're probably getting bounced just because they're Vanderbilt. Again, not fair. I wouldn't want to do that, but that just kind of is what it is. So you got to find a way to get out of this season 10-2.
Buy or sell, Garrett, that Georgia falls victim to a trap game in Starkville this week. Georgia clearly has everything to play for. Mississippi State finally broke that SEC losing streak at Arkansas last week. The Dogs are just 7.5-point favorites on the road, which maybe seems a little bit low.
Yeah, Starkville's dangerous. I think I still want to sell this one. I don't think Georgia is elite by any means. They have an elite defense. They play extremely well on that side of the ball. I have a lot of questions about the offense and their ability to do it, but it just seems like they've been a lot more consistent on the offensive side recently. They've done a lot better trying to kind of just stay within themselves, don't make mistakes, play to win, with whatever the defense can give you in terms of short fields and, coming up with the big stop. So I think they're playing a lot better. They've learned how to play their style of football a little bit. And so I like Georgia to be able to kind of maybe grind this one out, but at the end of the day, find a way to pull away. I also just don't understand, and I couldn't picture a Kirby Smart team failing like that, right? I just can't picture his
It would be
team going to
tough.
Starkville and really just laying an egg. Like, obviously, it can happen. Weird weeks happen all the time. Starkville's a crazy place to play. And I do believe in that Mississippi State offense, but I can't see Georgia doing that this year.
Georgia was in a close game the entire way against Florida, right? I know people got mad at Gunnar Stockton for taking a knee and not getting to the end zone and covering. Georgia wasn't covering that entire game. He did the smart thing. I had
Yeah.
no issue with that, even though it I know it hurt Trey's parlay. I think it broke his fantasy lineup. It was the only winner that did not hit. So, listen, if you were financially victimized by that, I can understand the frustration. With Texas looming on deck and the Longhorns are on a bye week this week, I think Kirby and the boys need a get right week. I think they need another opportunity to flex their muscle. I think Mississippi State may be in a letdown spot, right? They finally get that monkey off their back. They're going to be at home where they've had a lot of disappointment, and they've just got a much better team rolling in. I'm with you. I don't think Georgia has shown that they're elite really on either side of the ball, but this feels like a game where Kirby makes a point and finds a way to make a statement, getting his guys ready to play Texas at home next week. So I'll sell that. I think Georgia probably finds a way to cover. Maybe they force a late turnover or something.
So you
Win this
like
by
the
two
Bulldogs
scores.
in this one?
I do.
Okay. Just
Yeah,
they're both,
yeah,
just
yeah.
like the Bulldogs in this one.
I like the Bulldogs in red and black coming down the
Okay,
train
cool.
tracks
There we
into
go.
Starkville. Over to the Big Ten. I want you to buy or sell. Indiana and Ohio State will regret light schedules during the playoff. The schedule has been a much ballyhooed talking point between Indiana and Ohio State. Indiana, it's not their fault, right? I think they've had a couple of games that on their schedule that maybe have lessened in importance as the season has gone along. This Penn State game, of course, is one that both of these teams share. Ohio State took care of business last week. I think Indiana's probably getting ready to take care of business in Happy Valley this week. But Ohio State, on the other hand, since Texas, they really haven't been challenged at all. So, assuming both of these teams make it to the playoff, which right now it looks like they could cruise to 12-0, will there be a moment where they go, man, I wish we'd been tested before this?
See, I'm so glad you put this on the run sheet because I've been silently thinking this for a couple of weeks now, just kind of considering how this is going to play out and thinking about what teams are really in contention, who's going to get those top spots. Let me, kind of time out on the front end of this. It should not affect their seeding. I don't care if you play, if you do this, you've been dominant like this. It shouldn't, affect the seeding at the end of the day. And I don't think that that's something that they'll get punished for, and I would agree that they shouldn't get punished for it. You can only play who's on your schedule. You can't control that it turns out that Penn State was butt, right? You can't do anything about that.
Right.
But, okay, this is something I've been thinking about. Okay, when you look at teams like, A&M and Alabama, who I would consider those four teams the top four, and I think there's a little bit of a gap after that. When you look at those top four teams, Alabama's had to get out of some tough spots, right? I mean, think about South Carolina a couple weeks ago. They got in a real tough spot on the road, had to find a way to get out of there. A&M's been the same way. They haven't brought their A game a couple of times and have had to find ways to win. And I think that that's valuable when you get into the playoffs because all of a sudden the talent disparities, the coaching disparities, the advantages you think you have, they start to disappear. I would doubt it that when we get to the playoff, if we get matchups between any of Indiana, Ohio State, A&M, or Alabama, I doubt any of those teams win those games by 10 points. I think those probably all go down to the wire. And right now, if you're asking me, who do I trust to go down to the wire? I'm looking at the teams in the SEC right now because of what they've had to go through. And this is nothing about strength of schedule. This is nothing about the quality of the teams. This is truly just about being in that spot. I have seen with my eyes this season, for example, A&M go to South Bend, get in a dogfight, down 6. They miss the extra point, but you're down 6 and you got the ball. You got to go down and score, and they did it, right? They were in that spot and they did it. I've seen Alabama, like we said, with South Carolina. They had to find a way to score late, take advantage of a turnover, and then you score. That's what you have to do in order to win some of these tight games when, it's just that tight scenario. And having that game experience is a big deal. So, look, I don't think that it's their fault. I'm not going to knock them for it. I'm not saying the SEC is better than the Big Ten. I'm not saying any of that stuff. Just saying in terms of game scenarios that have played out, I think it's going to favor teams like A&M and Alabama down the stretch in the playoffs.
I tend to lean that way as well. I think Ohio State for sure is, I think because they've been there and they've done that. I trust them. I trust Indiana as well, but I do think that there will be a moment where maybe it gets a little tight and we start to wonder, okay, if they had played an SEC type schedule, if they had played 3, 4, 5 ranked teams, like some of their competitors will be able to say, did that end up costing them? Did that prepare them
Right.
for this moment or fail to prepare them? So I do think I think it's an interesting idea, something to watch for, certainly as we get into the
Well,
playoffs.
and there's even a chance that, and I can already hear the kind of rebuttal from the North, right? So from those folks up in Ohio and Indiana, let me just hear the rebuttal real quick. What if they are just that much better than everybody else and there's nobody who can challenge them, right? Okay,
Well,
sure. I'll hear you out on that one. There's a chance that Ohio State's defense is just so dang good, nobody's going to keep it close with them all year. There's a chance that Indiana is just so dang physical, they're not going to be in a close game like that. Sure, that's possible. I'll hear you on that one. I don't see that being the case once you get to the very end, if for nothing else but the stakes, right? I kind of trust Ohio State more, right? Ohio State, obviously, a lot of that team won the national championship last year. There's a lot of returning pieces from that team, but you still have to say, hey, it's this year. It's, there's a certain level of intensity you have to bring week in and week out. And once you get to the playoff, especially with that long sort of layoff for those top seeds, you could see him getting a little bit sleepy coming out the gates. We saw it with Oregon last year.
Yeah, no doubt. Two other games in the Big Ten, just to mention very quickly. Washington, 11.5-point favorites at Wisconsin this weekend. Luke Fickell still employed as of time of recording this. Have to imagine that he will coach this game. Maybe it's his last game. I kind of hope it is for Wisconsin's sake. And then USC finally gets a road win. It took a season-ending injury to Dylan Raiola for them to get it. But they did end up beating the Huskers. They're 14.5-point favorites against Northwestern at home this week. I think USC's passing game has got to get back on track. They were dreadful against the top passing defense in the country last weekend. So they need some sort of statement, certainly, I think, to get back in the good graces of those who would consider them for a playoff run, right? Their playoff lives still alive, although I think they're somewhat slim at this point, but they are still technically in the fight. But I don't think anybody actually considers them a real contender at this point. Let's move to the Big 12. You've got that 3-pack of games, one of which is on a Friday night. Houston at UCF. The Knights, 1.5-point favorites with the Cougs Big 12 championship path on life support. It feels like a bad spot for Houston, doesn't it? Right? You just got your apple cart upended at home. Now you've got to go to the bounce house against a UCF team that is not good, but they've been plucky at least.
Yeah, it's a tough emotional bounce back to be able to say, hey, we just lost a game that we feel like maybe we could have won, but just didn't come and bring our A game. Now we got to turn it around, get over the mistakes that we made, clean some stuff up, and then go on the road to a tough environment. It's not a great spot. I do think they'll probably win this game, but this is one of those that, look, Friday nights get weird. If I'm watching this one on my phone at historic Farrington Field this week and being at a high school rivalry game here in the great state of Texas, but if I'm watching that game on my phone and I look down and I see that UCF's up 14-0, I'll be like, oh boy, here we go again.
Elsewhere, Iowa State at TCU. The Horned Frogs are 6.5-point favorites. It's a fascinating game because I just don't know what, if anything, I can trust from Iowa State at this point. They blew that game against Arizona State last weekend. TCU, still alive, I guess, for the Big 12 title race. They need some help, but they're still alive. I don't know if TCU is actually good or not, so I'd probably stay away from this number, but I think I like the Horned Frogs to get the win at home.
I think so. I mean, look, they don't need to be good. They just need to be a little better than Iowa State, right? And Iowa State, I don't think, is all that good. So, look, it's been a weird season for both of these teams, I think, falling well short of expectations, but yeah, I can see TCU finding a way to get this win. It's probably not going to come easy. You're absolutely right about that.
Yeah. Kansas at Arizona would be a fun one to throw in the quad box. Insert the Fairly Odd Parents meme if I had one. I think that would be a fun game to keep your eye on in the afternoon window, but probably not going to get dedicated channel switching time. Certainly not with the Texas A&M game going on. I think that's going to own the primary screen, but listen, fun game if you love Big 12 Fury Road. That's probably where you're going to find it. In the ACC, we talked about this on the live show on Sunday with the walk-on red shirts. 6 teams with 1 conference loss or less. SMU is on the road at Boston College. They're 12.5-point favorites. Cal is at Louisville. The Cards are getting 18 in the hook against Cal. I know JKS hasn't looked very good in the last couple of weeks, but my gosh, that's a lot of points to lay at the feet of a potentially explosive Cal offense. You've got Duke playing in a weird non-conference game this late in the season against UConn, and then Pitt and Georgia Tech are both idle. Good for Pitt to try and get healthy. Good for Georgia Tech to rebuild Haynes King after a 500+ yard effort in a loss to NC State, also to try and recoup some of that confidence. Is there kind of a game or a storyline that you'd pick up from the ACC?
First off, because I wasn't able to because of technical issues on my side, just wanted to, again, shout out Haynes King on that previous game. 504, I think, total yards out of the 550 yards on their entire team. Somebody get this man some help. He's going to throw himself through a brick wall. I've mentioned the Simpsons meme multiple times, the kid throwing himself through the window, literally just Haynes King doing everything he can to try to win. Wasn't enough last time. But if I'm looking at any of these and just saying it, does anything catch my eye? I think that Louisville number starts to catch my eye because I think it tells you what we think of them. Man, Louisville's got it all right in front of them, right? And I know that everyone's got the one loss, but I think that if I'm going to pick one team to kind of emerge from this pack, it's got to be Louisville, right? They're talented. They're not necessarily at full strength, but they're talented and they could do a really good job. So I think that they're going to find their way, ultimately making it to Charlotte and then finding their way, maybe backdooring themselves into the playoff with a late run.
I haven't mentioned Jeff Brom as a candidate in our coaching dartboard article because, quite frankly, I don't want him to leave Louisville. I don't think it makes any sense for him to leave Louisville. His alma mater, he's had a lot of success there, right? Just came off the big upset win over Miami a couple of weeks ago. Like, this feels like a very obvious case of the grass is not always greener. And I don't care if that's Auburn, if that's Virginia Tech, wherever that is. I think he is much, much better at Louisville than anywhere else.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that one. I think he's found his spot and he can build that into something because, again, with the ACC, there's not, I don't think, like a power dominant program that you really have to worry about on a year in, year out basis with Clemson kind of being down, right? So, there's a couple teams that are vying for it. I know Miami kind of had their up and down, shows me for believing in them. SMU's been, pretty good the last couple of years. Depends on how long, Lashley stays there. We love Georgia Tech, obviously, everything that Brett Key's doing, but there's not really that dominant ACC program that's standing in the way of your success. So I think, if he could build this into a bit of a juggernaut, make it a little bit of a destination, certainly in a good spot in the country to recruit. So I think he could find his way and kind of make a name for himself there. I want him to stay.
Yeah, no doubt. Just a couple of G5 shout outs to finish out the show here tonight. Kennesaw State bowl eligible for the first time ever, obviously just in their second year in the FBS. They're actually tied for the Conference USA lead with Jacksonville State. So a huge shout out to Charles Huff as well, or I'm sorry, Charles Kelly, Freudian slip, at Jacksonville State for having the Gamecocks right there at the top of the conference. We wondered if their identity would change, if so much turnover would kind of sink their ship. That has not been the case so far this season. And both teams, ironically, could kind of share a plane if they wanted to. Kennesaw State's playing New Mexico State. Jacksonville State's playing UTEP. I like both of them to emerge with wins on the road this week. We mentioned midweek Maction. Certainly hope you've tuned in to the Tuesday night game as you're listening to this. You got Wednesday night and then Thursday night college football as well. And then shout out to Charles Huff, who I'll get his name right this time, at Southern Miss. He's got them rolling and in first place in the Sun Belt West. They face second place Arkansas State in Jonesboro. That Red Wolves offense just hasn't been as explosive as I wanted it to be in the preseason with Jalen Rayner at quarterback, Coy Rucker at wide receiver. It hasn't quite been what I thought it was going to be. So I think I like Southern Miss to win this game and continue marching towards a Sun Belt title, or at least a berth in the Sun Belt title out of the West.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I wasn't counting my Mississippis this time on your G5 shout-outs, though. I should have been counting to see how quick we could get it in.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that'll do it here for the Week 11 preview. I think we'll be back on Saturday night for our regularly scheduled live show.
Yeah,
We'll
fingers
see.
crossed, man. We can make it.
Yeah, stay tuned. Watch this space for more. We've actually, it's been nice having it on Sunday afternoon, but I think we'll probably get back to a regularly scheduled Saturday night show. Trey will be back from Utah, so we look forward to having him back on the program as well. But for Garrett Turney, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Until Saturday night. So long, everybody.